Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So welcome everybody who's watching today, and of course, welcome to everybody who'll be watching the recording later this week. My name is Parimal Rohit. I am a Cerritos College alum from 1995, and it's my honor to be here hosting Alumni Journeys today with our good friend, Dr. Juan Gavidia. Did I say your name right, Juan?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Cool, cool. So Juan, I want to give a little history and background of who you are before we dive into our questions. And just so you know, I'll probably start off with 3 or 4 questions of my own, and then I have about 6 questions from people who've submitted from throughout the week. But Juan is a Cerritos College grad. He was with us from 2001 to 2004, went on to earn his master's degree in clinical psychology from Antioch University-Los Angeles, and then his doctorate degree in applied clinical psychology from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology in Los Angeles. Juan specializes with preteens and teens and adults who suffer from anxiety, stress, depression, and racial trauma, as well as people who experience imposter syndrome. He also works with parents who struggle with life transitions such as aging, job loss, and career changes. So Juan, I just want to dive right into it and kind of get a sense of, when you arrived at Cerritos College in 2001, did you have was this part of your plan? What was going through your mind in terms of what you wanted your career to be? Kind of walk us through your decision-making process when you arrived at Cerritos College in '01.
Yeah. I don't think I had a plan. I at that time I was exploring, career choices. My stepdad owned a trucking business, and I remember he had an accountant. So that was kind of like a career that I'm like, oh well, it's practical. I took an accounting class in high school, and it was actually kind of fun. But then, it didn't, like, after the second semester, I'm like, no, I can't. I cannot do that. That's not me. Like, it felt so out of place. Then I wanted to study music because I love music. And then my professor at Cerritos was an incredible musician. He joked that his guitar was more expensive than his vehicle at that time. And I'm like, do I want that life? I don't know. It's a lot of dedication for my hobby to become my job. And I was like, I didn't want it. So at that time, I had a hard time getting into courses. And one of my counselors got me into just random classes. And one of them was Dr. Gaffney's Psych 101. And that class was like, from then it was just like, oh, this is the field. This is so interesting. And I think I took every single class at Cerritos. Like, I got involved in like anything that I could. We did the first brain awareness week and the drug awareness week, the first one. We put it together as a class with Professor Michelle Llewellyn, who's like one of my favorite teachers like ever. Yeah, I just kind of fell in love with psychology. It felt natural. Like it didn't feel like work. So that was kind of, it almost, I don't want to say that it felt like a calling, but it definitely felt like that was, my personality fit in with the profession. It was so interesting.
So one thing I think happens to a lot of people in college, especially when you're formulating your career, is you kind of develop, for better or for worse, kind of a romantic version of what the career is or what the job is that you're going to be going into. What was your first impression of, now that you're deciding this is your direction, what was in your head in terms of like, this is what I expect my career to look like as a psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever you end up being? And then if you could add to that the end of like, now where you're today, looking in retrospect, how much of your vision back then is matching up with what you became today?
Yeah. So I think that's an interesting answer to that, because I didn't have an expectation. I was just having fun with the subject matter, and everything was just so interesting to me. I didn't know I was going to be a therapist. I actually didn't know exactly what was the end. Was I going to teach? Was I going to do research? Because I love research. I love Dr. Duff's class. That was where we met, in research class. But I didn't, honestly, like, I wasn't paying attention to the end goal. I was just enjoying the classes and how interesting it was and everything I was learning, I knew it was going to end somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, I wasn't concerned with it. I was just like absorbing the information and having fun. Like, and that was kind of it. It was having a good time, to be honest with you. Yeah.
And so just bringing now fast forward to today,
Mm-hmm.
how have you viewed now your career looking back now? Has it met expectations? Has it, whatever expectations you might have had throughout your career, do you feel like you fulfilled some sort of mission or outlook, or do you still have work to do to kind of meet a certain goal?
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about this particular career is that it doesn't really end, and you
Mm-hmm.
kind of you get to chart your own waters once you arrive where you are or where I am. So again, I think like not. I wouldn't say like not having expectations, because I mean, I certainly had a goal in mind. I knew I wanted to graduate college and continue, because I knew bachelor's wasn't enough for this career. But once I got here, it's surpassed like everything that I thought it would be. Because even once I decided, hey, like I do want to be a clinician, I want to be a practitioner, I want to see people. Once you get there, you begin to see that there is like a limitation to what you want to do, because it's just not enough to like see clients. Like at some point, like you want more, right? And then your life experience, your passions, and all the other things begin to kind of color like the canvas a little bit more, and you see that seeing clients is just a piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I went back to school, because I really wanted to write a dissertation and have something that felt really personal to me.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still projects ahead of me that I'm working on currently, and it began with my thesis. I did my thesis on otherness.
All
So
right,
yeah,
let's actually get into that real quick. Just let's have a little sidebar here and tell us about otherness and what that means, and basically what was the findings you came across in your dissertation.
yeah. So I was trying to explore how so it's about the power dynamics between what we would call like the one and the other, right? So society seems to have a standard. Whatever society you're in, there's a standard of beauty, a standard of like, this is the majority. The power structure begins with this group. Every group that is not that group is another, right? So for instance, like you look at LGBTQ plus communities, right? They're the other of a cis community, right? If you're a cisgender, heterosexual couple is the one. A homosexual, like bisexual, like polyamorous relationship is other. Same thing with women. They're the other of men traditionally in our culture, right? Like you think of doctor, you think of nurse, automatically in our mind we begin to kind of put a gender assigned to it, and we tend to assign a doctor to males, nurses to females, a lawyers to males, right? So there's that deviation, and there's a power dynamic there. So same thing with like, if you're Latino, you're the other of if you're white. If you're Black, you're the other of whiteness. So in our language, right? Like I speak Spanish, that's an other language. Or if I listen to Spanish music, even if it's American music, it's still other. So that experience not only creates this sense of this connection between yourself and your community, but yourself and the world. Like, where do I belong if I don't feel like I have a place that I call home? Because even the place that I call home sees me as other. It sees me as foreigner.
Right.
It doesn't accept me as who I am. So that was
Wow.
kind of the exploration. Yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating. And I wish we almost had a whole hour just to talk about that, because there's so many questions I could ask about that. But I do want to ask one more question before I dive into the submitted questions. It seems, and this is just my take on everything you said so far, so it seems like you're very open-minded and you have a very even-keeled demeanor. Do you think that would you say, first of all, that that's accurate? And then if it is, how much of your personality plays into you being, I guess, an effective therapist where you're able to connect with your patients?
Yeah, like, so I think I'm really good at managing my energy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually really hyper. So, so like if you actually met me in person, like I have a lot of energy. So like I've learned to manage my energy with other people, especially like if I'm working with like introverts.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can definitely sense, you know, like if I have a supervisor, for instance, like that's introverted, I've noticed that my energy sometimes feels like a lot, and it's not something that I'm doing on purpose. It's just that I get excited about stuff, and
Right.
I just kind of go for it. So with my clients, I tend to use my energy and a lot of humor in the practice
Mm-hmm.
as a relational tool. So
Okay.
it's because we live in a transactional society.
Mm-hmm.
My work has to counter that by being relational.
Got it.
And yeah, so humor sometimes can help with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have 6 questions that were submitted through our sign-up form, and some of these questions are multi-part. So it's 6 questions, but some of them have 3 questions with them, some have 1, some have 2. So I'll just read them verbatim, and then we'll just go through these one by one. The first question we have submitted here, it's a 3-part question. So I'll just read the full part, and if you need to be reminded of them as you answer, let me know. So it's, why did you decide to pursue a Psy.D as opposed to a PhD? What recommendations do you have for students trying to decide between the 2 paths? And are there any pros or cons to attending a private university for a graduate degree as opposed to a public university?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. So the reason I went for a Psy.D was because I am a practitioner at heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so my role, I knew, was always going to be more on the scientist practitioner portion of the career. So where PhD is a little focused a bit more on research and academics, the Psy.D is more focused on the clinical aspect and the clinical application of the work.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the emphasis there. And the reason I went to a private college for my master's was, you know, I've been in public school all my life, and I wanted to try something a little bit different. Plus, the school that I went to had certain things that I wanted that were kind of teaching a bit outside the box. They had an emphasis on social justice. They had an emphasis on community psychology, more like macro level structural kind of things. And it was very experiential. It was almost like a deconstruction of the self through the process of learning. And it felt very different, especially if I'm going to become a practitioner, than like, you know, learning psychology through books or through, you know, so it was, yeah, so that was the difference.
Got it. Okay. This question is really specific. Any advice for communicating to my 15-year-old nephew who is on the autism spectrum? He's social with people he knows, but can't make eye contact when meeting others. So what advice would you have for him or her?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Any advice for communicating with my 15-year-old nephew who is on the autism spectrum? He's social with people he knows, but can't make eye contact with others when he's meeting new people.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing is this, like you know, just the same way that, you know, if I'm right-handed, right? I can't write with my left hand if my life depended on it. I mean, I guess if it did, I'll try. So sometimes like we can't force something that doesn't feel natural.
Right.
So one thing that's really important is that we all have different abilities. We all have different ways of communicating. And as long as, you know, the eye contact is not something that is detrimental to communication, that doesn't necessarily would be an issue. I mean, it can be, definitely can be. And there are some things that they can learn. But, you know, you have to meet where that person is at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
You can't force someone to do something that they're not ready to do yet. And with age, you know, people tend to, I used to work with people who suffer from schizophrenia. And sometimes with age, some of the symptoms kind of, they're able to manage it much, much better. Not to equate the two, right? But sometimes like you do learn some of those skills as you get a little bit older. But sometimes pushing someone, you're just, you know, you're pushing someone away. And they may not be ready for that at this point. But you know, if they're having issues with communication, you know, contact regional center. They have speech pathologists, like social workers, case managers that can kind of help with socialization. And those are always a really good ways kind of teaching that person to socialize.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Our next question is, if you happen to run into one of your patients outside the office, say at the grocery store, how do you handle that?
And so the rule is, so there's no law. So then we have to follow the ethic, right? So there's law and there's the ethic. So the ethic of it says that we don't engage unless they start the conversation at that point. So then that would be a conversation to have with a client. So I would, when we first start, hey, like these are some of the ground rules. If we meet outside of therapy, like it's not that I'm trying to ignore you, but to maintain confidentiality, like I'm not gonna be the first one to initiate, but you can. And whatever you decide to break confidentiality, that's kind of, you have the agency to do that.
Got it. And I'm just curious, as a follow-up, has it happened where you have run into clients in public sector? Okay.
Yeah, which is really interesting because like I've never run into someone. Yeah.
Okay. Next question, and this is several questions within one, so I'll try to keep it online here.
Mm-hmm.
What was financial aid like for the master's program and the doctoral program? Were you concerned about student loans upon graduating from your master's and then going into a doctoral program? Do you offer any opportunities for mentorship, and any advice for people who are currently in the graduate program?
Look, the reality of life is that, again, in our system, debt to go to college is just part of the deal. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate, but it's what it is. Yeah, of course, being concerned with it. But I mean, to me, it's like the end goal is to reach to where I want to be. And if I have to pay this back in full, then that's what's going to happen, right? We just kind of work to make sure that gets paid. But the thing is this, like the doors just open. I mean, like the moment, I started my private practice, I didn't, like the first time I got licensed. First I got licensed and then I went back for my doctorate. And I was running my own like little private practice without really doing much advertising. And I had a nice little practice on the side, so I was able to maintain like, my bills and all the other stuff that we had to take care of. But yeah, I mean, that's just a concern. And it's just kind of like a thing that we just have to do it. Like we don't have any other option at this point. You can find grants and that type of stuff to compensate some of that, but at a doctoral level is really difficult if you're not in a research program.
Right. Okay. There were two more questions that were in that same question, and it was it difficult to obtain a job after graduating? And if someone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach out to you? Is there an email you have, or if you're comfortable sharing that?
Yeah.
What jobs are available afterwards, and is there a way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah. Oh, and same thing with the previous question. Like if there's like mentorship and stuff, I mean, people can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm really open. People reach out to me. Like I'm more than welcome to talk to people. So I'm pretty open with sharing my experience and that type of stuff. But what kind of job? I mean, there is, especially if you live here in LA or one of the big cities, really you're not going to have a hard time finding work. Is it going to be the best job? Probably not. Especially if you're a practitioner, because like, when you first exit your master's program, you have to collect hours for licensure. So now you're collecting 3,000 hours. Well, 2,000 because you did 1,000. Hopefully you did 1,000 when you left your program. So you have another 2,000 hours to complete. And at that time you're under supervision. So the work is limited, but you can work at a community clinic. I work with, again, at that time I was working with people with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, homeless populations, so yeah, you do a lot of that, like really heavy lifting, like you're doing a lot of the heavy lifting and a lot of the agencies because you're working with more severe populations. But there's a lot of work. I think therapists are always on demand. That's not something that's gonna run out of, there's a lot of jobs for that. On top of that, you can do other things too. Like if you focus on other areas, like let's say you do not want to be a clinician, there are people who go into consulting, or they go into journalism, or they go into, other aspects where like they can use some of their skills to do the work. So I had friends who didn't do a clinical practice. They actually went straight into consulting and that type of stuff, marketing. So there's that. You can also go into private practice. Like if you reach out to a private practitioner, again, just know that it's at that point you're working under supervision, and now you have to also like market yourself so you can learn how to build your own practice when you're working with someone else. So the job may not be that you're getting a steady paycheck. It's kind of like the clients that you get is how much you're gonna get paid, which is
Right.
it's basically running your own business, but not really because you don't get the full commission. You get a split of that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the last question: how could someone get in touch with you if there's an email or a phone number you'd like to share, whatever comes
Yeah,
up?
so they can look at my LinkedIn. My
Mhm.
information's there. Like it's
Okay.
public. They can reach out to me. I think my email should be there too. So just my
Okay.
first initial last name at gmail.com. Yeah. So
Got it.
send me like a brief little whatever you want, and then we can kind of schedule to meet and the type of stuff. Yeah, I'm pretty open. Like I get a lot of people who like reach out to me, and yeah, I
Sure.
don't have I have time to talk to people. So.
Got it. Okay. Next question. And you kind of touched upon this, but maybe there's more you could add. What helped you decide on studying clinical psychology, and what career options do you have with your training?
hmm what was the second part?
So the second part was, what career options do you have with your training?
Uh-huh. And then the second part of the question.
That was the second part of the question. The first
Oh, the
part was
second part.
what? Yeah, the first one was
Oh, I got you.
what helped you decide on studying clinical
Yeah.
psychology?
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
So what helped me decide? I think it was just really an interesting field to me. Also, kind of growing up, I was always kind of walked in the middle of spaces, kind of in between kind of worlds a little bit.
Mhm.
I was very social, but like I was always kind of we talk about other. I was kind of that person where like I can like navigate through like middle points in life. So I was always like very observant of kind of how we interacted with each other. So to me, getting into this field as a practitioner, it was kind of, it was so interesting to learn human behaviors and how we interact with one another and the different experiences of other people, the stories, and helping people kind of through that. That was so appealing to me. And I mean, there's tons of trainings. That's the good thing about this career. Like, a lot of people think that you go to grad school to become a therapist. No, it's just, you go to grad school so you have the permission to become a therapist. Then you get your hours, then you get your license, and you continue to do trainings because it doesn't end, right? So like, yeah, so I'm always like trying to find like what can I do next? What other trainings can I go and and you kind of chart your own waters once you become a professional. So like for me, like I love philosophy. So my work is always like kind of rooting back my practice into philosophy, which is a place where we have moved away from in our field, in the practical field. And so for me, it's like learning that and implementing that into my practice as well. So yeah, so I mean, it's endless practice and clinical experience that you can learn from various places. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. This one's a little tough one, and it'll require a lot of your opinion. So, what are your thoughts on the long-term educational and psychological effects on children as a result of the pandemic?
See, like, I think kids are a lot more resilient than people give them credit for. Like, of course, like, it wasn't easy. It hasn't been easy for anyone. But look, if you give a child the opportunity to bounce back from this, they're going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean, you nurture them, you tell them that you love them, you give them opportunities to interact with other people. You know, I don't think it's going to be, I don't think that there's going to be like long lasting psychological. I think maybe on the first year, maybe a little bit difficult to get back into the public world. But I think once kids get back and they start playing, they meet their friends, they'll just go back to play. Having said that, there are some kids that are a little bit more sensitive, right?
Mm-hmm.
They may be picking up on the anxiety of the parents, the anxiety of other people, and those things may have a lasting impact. So I think So for kids like that, it's like make sure that there's enough support, and they can even see like a child psychologist, so they can kind of work through some of that stuff. So, but do I think that overall it's going to have a huge impact? And I think kids are really resilient. I work with kids a lot, and I've seen kids bounce back from like hearing voices and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, very severe conditions, very severe trauma, and bounce back.
Sure. Okay. Just as a broader question, and I'm adding to this. You know, with the pandemic, has there been more additional challenges for you as a therapist in terms of dealing with some of the issues that come up, or just walk us through how the past 15 months have been for you?
Mm-hmm. I think that the hardest part was the beginning, just because, you know, practice from face to face to now people lost their jobs, and, you know, kind of getting back to like having a platform. That was a difficult transition. At that time, I was starting my postdoc,
Mm-hmm.
and it was challenging because I was kind of beginning to build my practice at that time. Oh, let me see. Did I lose you?
No, we're still here.
Oh, let me see. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you. I think your screen froze, but we can still hear you.
Oh, let me see. Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yeah. And I see
Give
other
me
people
1
nodding
second.
too, so I think we could also hear you.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to the connection.
Yeah, we still have audio, so if you want to still keep talking, we could definitely still hear you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let me try this.
the screen is still
Hold on.
frozen.
I'm gonna come in and out.
Okay. The beauty of Zoom meetings, huh?
Oh, there you are.
There
Okay.
you go. Welcome
I'm
back.
There you go. I was like, what happened?
Welcome back. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was saying, I think the last thing I said was, yeah. So moving the practice to online was the most challenging part, because we didn't have the platform at that time. So, you know, and then once the government kind of said, you know, hey, like you can use Zoom, you can use Google Meet and all that stuff, it made it a lot easier, because at that point we didn't have, you know, we couldn't use any platform because of confidentiality. So once that happened, it opened everything up, and it made it a lot easier. And of course, like there were like ethical considerations now that we had to deal with, like, you know, if I had someone that was, I didn't at this time, but if there was domestic violence, for instance, then it may not be a good idea to see someone in, you know, through Zoom. So there's others, you have to kind of figure out like how do you navigate those waters. So those were definitely challenges. For me though, like, you know, like luckily I have a really good support system. It made things a lot easier because I can schedule things, you know, I was more flexible. My schedule was more open. I can, you know, I didn't have to travel anywhere to see clients. And of course, like I go to my office, right? Like that's where it was. Like, but still, like just because I'm home, like it makes it a lot easier for me to be available. So I don't think it's made it harder. I think it's made it a lot easier. Yeah. So that's kind of how I see it. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. One, I wanted to ask, and I'm kind of asking this because it was another submitted question, but I think it ties to your otherness thesis. So to be a Latino who's, you know, in the healthcare space and in the doctor space, what does that mean to you? And if you could phrase that kind of in the context of your thesis, and not, you know, just what that means both to you personally and what it means to, you know, society at large.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the first things that you learn when you're even like at Cerritos College, you know, you're learning about a lot of theory, a lot of case studies. One of the first ones that I remember hearing about was like the social identity theory, right? So it was like like how do you see yourself in society and being reflected in society? And so if you don't see people who look like you in a history book, or in a job that's you know that's considered to be more prestigious, right? Then you're identifying with like people like me don't do those type of jobs. You know, that like, I can only reach this heights, right? And so for me, like, it was really important to go to college because like I had a really strong understanding of that since I was a little kid. So I was actually I was born in El Salvador. I came here when I was 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So being born in another place and coming here and kind of, you know, learning the language and all the stuff, again, like I was always kind of in this like middle spaces. But because I grew up in a society where it was very homogenous, right? Like most people looked like me. I kind of grew up with a bit of, at least my first 9 years, like there was like, I understood privilege where like I was part of the majority. So coming here, I wasn't. And then there was that big distinction. But then part of me had already internalized that feeling of like, I feel like that internal power within me. So so really early on, I understood like those power dynamics. I understood like my place in society. I understood like how my friends saw me. You know, I picked up the language really quickly. I did really well in school. Because of that, I was in classes that were, you know, more advanced. Unfortunately, there weren't a lot of Latinos in places like that for many reasons, right? Like not because they weren't smart, there's like lack of access, lack of all kinds of stuff. So, you know, going to college wasn't a choice anymore for me. It was something that it was like I just had to do because I understood like my place had a different significance, at least for myself. So that's why I wanted to get my master's. That's why I had to go get my doctorate. And, you know, being in grad school, I was the only Latino in like half of the classes. And then on top of that, sometimes I was the only guy.
Wow.
So this profession is also like really dominated by women.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, so it's, yeah. And, you know, many times I would ask questions like, well, how does this theory apply to the communities that I work with? And my professors didn't have answers to that. Like actually, like I had a few really weird encounters with professors in class in my grad school that because I was asking those questions, I was kind of like a target. And I can sense the discomfort because they didn't know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of saying I don't know, it was like I was like poking the bear, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but I just kept on asking the questions anyways because like I wanted to learn because that's, you know, it was so interesting to me. Like I want to know. So, you know, like, so you find that passion in your work and your career because of your experiences and where you come from and all that stuff. So definitely my experience definitely led to my dissertation. It led to my clinical practice. Yeah. It's actually led to like many of the people that I work with right now actually look for me as a therapist specifically because of the work that I do.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you know, and I work with a very diverse group. So like, you know, I have, you know, you know, like a cisgender, like white woman who is like, hey, I work in a community clinic where like I'm sensing the weight of justice, like the social justice and the injustices and all this stuff. And I don't know how to navigate that. I feel afraid to even say something because it's like I'm white and I'm afraid to like say the wrong thing. Like, how do I navigate that, right? So she's working through that in her own experience. Then I'm also working with, you know, people who are like young professionals in various like, you know, fields, and same thing. Like they're like, hey, I'm the only person of color in this space, and it feels really like alienating to be the only one. And I feel, and I use the word alienated as like I feel alien. I don't even feel like I'm a human being in there, you know. And also like, how do you navigate things like, you know, yeah, that's a great idea. It's awesome. God, that's such a beautiful thing you came up with. But then when it comes to like push that idea to the top, it gets dropped. And what does that do to you? When that happens over and over and over again, you begin to question like, then it's all performative. Am I not good enough? Like, what the hell am I doing here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like those things begin to chip away at a person's psyche and your esteem and your value and all that stuff. So my practice really is that, and like, which is again like that in my dissertation and my research, was focused on that because like I wanted to make sure my practice also centered those stories and those ideals. Like, how do we bring the weight of society into the private practice? Right? How do we not pathologize anxiety and depression? Because that's what we tend to do. Like, oh, you're feeling sad. Well, you're depressed. You know, there's something wrong with you. Here's a pill. So we pathologize that as opposed to like, no, like, is there a reason why you're feeling depressed and anxious? Is there a purpose behind that? You know, is there a function for that? Maybe it's a protective mechanism. Maybe something in your system is telling you that something is wrong. Figure it out, right? So it's getting rid of the pathology in mental health. So.
Great.
I hope that answers your question.
That does. It's a great answer. Thank you for that. And I want to finish with this last question. I want to bring it back to Cerritos College. And in light of everything we've just talked about in the past, 30, 40 minutes, how do you think Cerritos College kind of gave you the foundation and the background to effectively build the life that you built?
Gosh, I mean, like, again, I wasn't joking. Like, I think I talk about Cerritos. I talk up Cerritos College more than any other place. I transferred to college at Long Beach after Cerritos, which is great too, but it wasn't the same. It was, you're disconnected. You know, it's a huge campus with like huge classes, and you have no access to your professors. Good luck like trying to talk to someone, you know, in person. It was really, it feels so distant. But at Cerritos, like I really got the sense that I can, you know, I can go to Dr. Duff's office or Dr. Gaffney or Michelle's office and sit there sometimes just to like ask a question or just talk about random stuff, you know. And it was like this like relational aspect to the experience that it felt really empowering. So when I moved to the next, you know, to the next, my next venture, I felt like I had the tools to like navigate through that because it didn't feel scary anymore. So I think a lot of people, there's the fear of like, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to ask. And to me, Cerritos just felt like it was like such a relational experience that I can go to any one of my professors and I would get an answer. Last time I was there, I had a professor who's like really funny guy. I had him for me for one class. It was for like a poli-sci class. And I was walking by and I recognized him because he's like hilarious, right? And it was so funny. He like recognized me. It was like, it's been years, like more than a decade. And he looks at me, he points at me and he's like, Mr. Gavidia. It was so funny, you know? And then he asked about like, yeah.
You mind sharing who the professor was? Who was he? Do you remember?
Dr. Obasahan. Dr. Obasahan. I don't know if he's still there.
You know, I had him too for I think it was one of my first poli-sci classes at Cerritos.
He's hilarious.
I had him, yeah.
Yeah, and he started asking me like questions like, "Where's Miss Blah? Where's Mr. Blah?" Because those the people I was hanging out with at that time.
Yeah.
And it felt really cool, you know, like just like having that interaction and stuff with Dr. Basahan. So it was good times.
Excellent.
Yeah. So that was Cerritos to me. Like that's what I see it. Yeah.
Great. So this is Juan Gavidia. Thank you so much. I mean, this was a very inspiring story, and I'm glad you were able to share your experience with us and your story with us. And I guess, you know, it's we got a few minutes left. If you just want to have a general conversation with the rest of the people that are here with us, it's an open forum now. So yeah, but thank you so much, Juan. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for
Matthew, did you want to jump in and say anything before we move on?
Yeah, as Parimal said, Dr. Gavidia, thank you so much for your time today. We really do appreciate this, and this is we want to make this event as interactive as possible. So, if anyone has an additional question or would like to say something to Juan, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. All right.
Well, I do. Actually, I would just like to make a comment. Sorry, Kimberly. Well, Juan, thank you, Juan. I really appreciate your presentation, and I love the follow-up questions as well. So that was really cool. Very, very good. So I graduated from Cerritos, and it's so interesting to hear this. I can't wait to read your dissertation, but about being other, because I know that feeling. And when you said that, I'm a lot older now, but I remember sitting in a sociology class or another class, and it was, he didn't even see me. There was one, you know, well, it happened often. I'm kind of raising my hand, and I'm so scared to do that anyways, to raise my hand, but I'm doing it and to still be ignored. You know, it's, and it, you know, that happens through most of our academic, you know, experiences, but somehow we overcome that, right? We're not, and I kept telling myself, I'm not going to be a statistic. I'm not going to be a statistic. That's what motivated me. But I would love to have more discussion. I do work with a group. Well, they're like at risk. It's even like at continuation schools, kick them out of school here in Norwalk. And I think just that to have that conversation to hear, would help them, or probably most students, is like, where do I fit? Where do I fit in all of this? Yeah. You know, and a lot of times you just don't know where you fit. And then when you do, it's like, I don't want to teach others either, you know, and it's like almost like crazy making sometimes, because you're just caught in all that.
You know what? And it's interesting that you mentioned that. So I used to work with, I used to do groups with like at-risk youth in the inner cities too. I used to work in Inglewood, you know. And so I remember I was doing this group once. And so it was at a continuation school, and I had, I think, maybe like 8 kids that would show up every week, once a week. And it was mostly Latinos. There was like 2 Black kids and like one Asian kid in that class. So we were having this conversation, and, you know, I forgot what we were talking about. It was, you know, something with like drugs or something like that. It was a very interactive group. And one of the kids got up and became really frustrated, and he kind of jumped out of his seat, and then he said to me, like, you just don't, like, excuse my language, but he's like, you just don't fucking get it. He's like, you're never gonna get it. And he's like, you have no idea what it's like to live where I live. And I was like, I have no idea what it's just like, I triggered this child, right? And then he said to me, like, he remembered when he was 14 years old and his friend got shot in front of him, and he carried him, and he says he died in his arms. And then he's like, I was like, I don't know what that's like. I did not grow up in that neighborhood or a neighborhood like that. But it was really interesting. When he says you don't get it, you're never gonna get it, he says, you're white, you're never gonna get it. And there was something about that comment, because then I asked him, he knew that I wasn't white, he knew that I was like Latino, I talked about my experience. And I asked him, like, you know, where did that come from? And then he said, I never met someone who was in grad school. I'd never known anyone that's had a master's degree. So he had equated my success, my position, to whiteness. So, like, at that point, to me, it became clear that whiteness wasn't just about color. It became about, like, your position in life, right? Like, I had climbed to whiteness in the eyes of this kid. Yeah. So, and again, in my practice, right, when you're working with clients, it doesn't matter if the person's Latino, if the person's in a low-income family or whatever, like, you're in a whole different power dynamic at that point.
Yeah,
so
true.
And yeah, so it was kind of that. It was really interesting.
I could just go on. I was a Puente project counselor at Cerritos and at El Camino College. Are you familiar with Puente? Puente project?
I've heard of it.
So yeah, I've been a counselor in different colleges, and then eventually retired. But I would love to down the line have a conversation with you about that. We probably know the same people, but anyways, thank you so much. I don't want to hog up the conversation.
No, thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great. Yeah, Stephanie, I would love to sit on a call with you and Dr. Gavidia. That would be great. But I had a question for you. So, you know, the comment first, you're memorable because, one, you're probably the most happiest positive student I ever had at Cerritos, and you had me like 20 years ago, so that's why we remember you. And I love that you're still so positive and happy, and how wonderful for your clients, for your patients, that this is your profession. So the question I have for you, because I even struggle with this as an instructor, I cannot even imagine what your experience is like as a therapist. How do you compartmentalize your work and your home life? And what I mean by that is, when you're talking about these children with these traumatic experiences, or you're working with adults that are experiencing some severe mental health diagnosis, how do you not bring that home with you? So how do you compartmentalize so that you're not just constantly being worried and concerned about your clients that you're trying to help?
You know, like, so the way that because I've been asked that question a lot, like, and I don't bring work home. I mean, my wife will tell you, like, I barely ever talk about clients, or I show up moody, or like anything. It's just like, I just don't. But to me, like, the way that I conceptualize that is that it's almost like a respect thing. You know, when I see the people that I'm working with, like, they cannot take me home with them. So they go back to their lives, like, no matter, like, you know, the bubble that our session was, it was that moment in that bubble, and they get to go back to trauma, to dealing with depression, to dealing with anxiety. So, like, I cannot carry that, because that's something for them to carry, to work through. And for me to take that with me, it's almost like co-opting their story, and that's not my place. Like, if I want to help them, like, I have to be able to go back and do my thing, take care of myself, so that I can be there for them again next time. Because the moment I do that, I put myself in their story at that level. Not that I don't feel it, not that I don't, like, because in that moment I'm really connected with my client. But I need to be ready for the next person, and the next person, and then next week, and the following week. So that's the only way that I've been able to conceptualize that. But it's not something that I think about. Like, you know, I've always been, self-care was so important to me. So I do a lot of things to take care of myself. Yeah, it's always been like a natural thing. So that's how I see it. But it's really hard for me to say, oh, this is the one thing that I do, and it's just like I'm consciously doing it. It's just like, I don't know. It just kind of happens. Yeah.
That's a great response. I mean, like I said, I still struggle with that as an instructor, right? There's students that I think about that I had 15 years ago that were experiencing homelessness or had suicidal ideations that I, you know, had to walk over to the student health center. So I really like your response. I think you're definitely a good match for your profession. So that's
but also,
great.
you know, the other thing, now that you mentioned that too, like, the other thing is this, like, when you have someone in crisis and it's one time, then that's it, right? Like, you don't know what happens to that kid. When I work with the people that I work with, I know they're coming back next week. So that's different. It's this continuous work that we're doing. And it's like taking that moment and bring it back next week to session. And if something comes up, like, let's talk about it, let's work through it. So it's a little bit different, I think, for me, because, like, it continues, right? It's not just like a one-time thing. It hits you and then you're like, I don't know what happened to that child. I don't know what happened to that person. Yeah, I think that hits a lot harder.
And can I be cheesy for a moment?
Sure.
Kimberly, I want to give you an applause. I mean, look at what Juan is doing, and you're definitely a factor in that. So I want to say thank you for the role you played in his life, because he's definitely a gem, and you were a big part of it. Thank you for that.
So true. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I'm glad he stayed in touch, because I'm telling you, this is how he was in class, maybe bouncing around a little bit more, but so positive and just so empathetic and thoughtful. So I'm so thrilled that you've pursued this path, Juan, and I know you're doing a fantastic job with your clients. So it's wonderful.
Thank you. Yes. Appreciate that.
Yes. Any other questions anybody wants to chime in before we move on for the night? All right. Well, thank you again, Juan. It was a great pleasure talking with you for the past hour. And, you know, hopefully we could continue to be your support system here at Cerritos College. And, you know, anytime you need anything from us, let us know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, Dr. Loft. Thank you. Like, and it's true, like, you know, but, you know, without the people that I've met at Cerritos, like, I don't think I would have been here. You know, I still stay in touch with Dr. Gaffney. I met with him like 3 weeks ago. It's just like, you know, so, like, absolutely. It was an inspiration to be there, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Nice. Well, Matthew, we'll hand it back to you to wrap things up.
Yeah, no, thank you, Juan, once again for being here. This has been a really great evening, and we really appreciate you. And Parimal, thank you for being our great host. And everybody, thank you for being here tonight and attending this event and being a part of this. We really appreciate you, and we know that you have many choices on what to do with your time, and we really appreciate you spending your time with us tonight. It truly does mean a lot to us. And have a wonderful evening, and thank you so much, and take care, everybody.
Yeah, and happy Memorial Day. Got a nice week coming up. Yeah, happy Memorial Day.
Yeah, happy Memorial Day. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, bye.